Game-changing threat from North Korea. Could Guam be the target of a nuclear weapon?
Good evening, everyone. It has been a very busy night in our newsroom. At this hour, we know the North Koreans are looking at plans to attack the U.S. territory.
ABC's Emily Rao reports on the president's chilling warning to Kim Jong-un.
An explosive threat from President Trump.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The chilling warning in response to Kim Jong-un's threat to make the U.S. pay dearly following tough new UN sanctions.
He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement.
ABC News confirmed a Washington Post report that U.S. intelligence analysts believe North Korea can now produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can fit inside its intercontinental missiles.
This is the most momentous day in his nuclear program.
Just 10 days ago, Kim Jong-un launched an ICBM into space. Analysts concluding the missile trajectory could potentially reach the east coast of the United States, including New York and Washington, D.C. What remains unknown, whether North Korea has tested the smaller nuclear warhead and if it could survive re-entry.
The worst thing we could do is panic and respond to this with a bad move like military action.
But late Tuesday, North Korea's state-run news agency announcing the regime is carefully examining plans to attack Guam to contain U.S. bases there.
All right, just breaking, the market turning lower, just a couple points lower right now, amid news that North Korea is one step closer to becoming a full-fledged nuclear power. This news coming to us from the Washington Post. The rogue nation has successfully produced a miniature nuclear warhead that can fit inside its missiles. Fox News military analyst General Jack Keane joins me now with more. And General, I'd start by asking you, what does this mean? Help me interpret the Washington Post headline for all of us. What does it mean to our country?
Well, first of all, let's accept the fact that it's true. We don't know that for a fact, but it's likely true, and it's likely, obviously, our administration is very much aware of this. They've had this knowledge for some time, and it was on the table in their discussions with the Chinese and Russians about the economic sanctions that they were just able to successfully get through the UN, so credit to them. But what it means is North Korea has made another step towards nuclearizing ICBMs capable of reaching the United States. The Chinese and the North Koreans, I believe, have always made the same calculation based on historical fact, that if they nuclearize ICBMs, putting American people at risk, the United States would never conduct regime change in North Korea, and the United States would also, and this is important to understand, accept that reality. In other words, they would acquiesce to that capability, just as the United States acquiesced to North Korea having nuclear capability, and just as they acquiesced to China, Trish, having ICBMs in the 1960s after they acquired atomic bombs. We protested loudly about the Chinese having that capability, and we eventually acquiesced. They have both made the calculation that's what's going to happen here. Not war, but the United States will accept this reality, and it's based on the behavior, I believe, of the Obama administration in appeasing and accommodating the Iranians and their policy of strategic patience with the North Koreans. I think that has always been the elephant in the room here.
Okay, so it's a different administration. Do you think we're going to accept that reality now?
I think they're coming to the reality that they cannot, and that is one of the reasons why China signed up for the sanctions. But the sanctions, though comprehensive, though better than anything we've done before, still permits North Korea to have a decent economy because their clothing and textile industry is not touched. China is still going to sell oil to North Korea. That's the reality of what's taking place there. We're still not there, I believe, in actually capturing China to the point where they will force North Korea to stand down. We are not there yet.
General, I'm with you on the sanctions. You know, great. I'm glad that China and Russia signed up, but I would point out that $1 billion, when you're talking about and it's a small economy, right? Nothing like ours, but it's a $28 billion roughly estimated economy, so $1 billion isn't that big a hit. Not to mention, as you say, you got to actually count on the Chinese to enforce the sanctions. And Lord knows that hasn't worked so well in the past. So, I think we're putting a whole lot of hope into these sanctions, while meanwhile we got a real severe reality going on. And I'm curious to get your perspective on this. I've heard from some that we're, a year and a half out from them being able to actually really hit us.
Well, I think that's likely the case. Listen, I don't know for a fact because I don't talk to intel guys about anything like this. I don't want to have that kind of information. So I'm reading newspapers just like you are and listening to Fox where you get the best information. But the fact is, yes, let's assume they do have a miniaturized nuclear capability, and let's assume they tested it and they know it works. They still have to get an ICBM to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere successfully. They have not demonstrated that capability. The last one burned up. They also have to be able to hit a target successfully. They wouldn't risk sending an ICBM to the United States with a nuclear warhead without the confidence that it's going to hit what they're shooting at. And they also know, listen, because they're paying attention to our capability more than Americans do, obviously. We can obliterate North Korea just using our submarine force alone, much less our own arsenal of ICBMs.
Would it come to that?
It would come to that if they attacked the United States. That's exactly what would happen.
For more on this, we go to former CIA agent Jack Rice. Jack, nice to have you with us. And addendum to this story, within the last hour, North Korea has responded tonight, threatening to hit the American island of Guam. Now, let's start at the top with the information that the American people in the world are being given here. How good is the intelligence that tells us that North Korea has this capability? Let's start there tonight, because obviously we know what faulty intel has done to the world, especially the United States, and here we are on the verge possibly of a strike on North Korea. Your thoughts on the intel? How good is it?
It's actually a very good point, because it's not all of the intelligence community that's saying that this is the case. Again, what we're talking about here is twofold. What we know is that you need a delivery system. The North Koreans have already had 2 tests in the last 30 days to establish that point. That second issue is about the nuclear capability and to have a miniaturized version that fits into that ICBM. So that's what we're talking about. There is one part of the community who is saying, yeah, it appears that they have it at this point. But again, it's hard to tell if it's been tested, whether or not those two are symbiotic, whether they actually work together. And so those issues have to be determined. I don't think it's been perfect in the past, and we know this. We know the intelligence community has failed at this issue, and in fact, they were wrong specifically on the North Koreans several times back in 2010, back before that in 2006. So I think before we jump the gun, we need to be very careful about what it is that we claim here. But intel that we do have are direct threats repeatedly from Kim Jong-un, and one tonight saying that they're going to hit Guam. How do you have a rational policy when you're dealing with an irrational leader? And some may say that what the president said tonight was irrational. What about this? It's funny, as you were starting to say that, I was trying to figure out which leader you were talking about, to be honest, because the real issue is Kim Jong-un isn't irrational. He's very rational. He's logical in terms of what it is he's trying to do. Let's think about this for just a sec. What he's really afraid of is 2 things. He's afraid of the West and what the West could do to him. He's also afraid of an internal uprising inside of his own country. He has killed lots of people in an effort to tamp that down as well. He needs to push back on the West to keep them out, but he also needs to make sure that he excludes them from supporting an internal fight. At the same time, to treat him like he is a crazy person basically means there is no way possible to negotiate with him. What he's trying to do is one thing right now, and that is survive. He wants to make sure he doesn't die in a ditch like Muammar Gaddafi did in Libya. And so he is going to fight at every level. And frankly, Ed, I think, honestly, he will never, ever let go of his nuclear capability. He will never do that. He just won't. And finally, Jack, what do you make of the fact that Russia and China have not responded to what the president said or to what Kim Jong-un has threatened tonight? Is this a game changer? Well, I think it's smart that the Russians and the Chinese are trying to pull back on this, because what this can't be is an ego fight. And right now what it felt like was a fight between Trump on one side and Kim on the other, and to see who can make more outlandish statements. And the fear is that if somebody flinches, if somebody screws up, there could be hundreds of thousands of dead people here. This is a very real fight. This is shockingly dangerous. And the last thing we need to do is stand down and start bumping chests and talk about who's the bigger man.
Well, people who have family on the island of Guam are very concerned tonight.
KCAL 9's Stacey Butler continues our team coverage now with that part of the story live from Los Alamitos tonight. Stacey.
Jeff and Susie, I'm told that where there are military towns like this one here in Los Alamitos, there are big numbers of people from Guam living. Well, tonight I sat down with one family and they say they know that Guam has had its share of problems in the past, but they've never seen anything like this.
This is pretty scary. Could lose a lot of people.
When Clarissa Solano heard about North Korea's newest threat against her home island of Guam,
the first thing that really came to mind was the branches of the military that's out there. Hang on, Lamia.
From her home in Los Alamitos, she got on Facebook and messaged her loved ones.
My family's out there. I have my mom's family, my dad's family.
The news of a possible missile strike against Guam hit her cousin, Heidi Kanga, hard. She runs the Katuran Chamorro dance troupe to keep the Pacific Islander traditions alive. This weekend, they celebrate their 24th anniversary.
Here we're thinking, you know, it's a great time, but, you know, our family and friends back home, it could change really fast. So it's in the back of my mind. I'm definitely praying for them.
Oh, okay. This isn't a new threat, but she says it's the biggest one she's seen in decades.
We just recently celebrated the 73rd anniversary of, you know, our liberation. So World War II is still fresh in our minds.
A violent hurricane brought this family to Los Alamitos decades ago. But this political storm has the power to destroy everything they've ever known.
I want to reassure the people of Guam that currently there is no threat to our island or the Marianas. My Homeland Security advisor, who is in communications with Homeland Security and the Department of Defense, notes that there is no change in the threat level resulting from North Korea events. And additionally, I've reached out to the White House this morning. An attack or threat on Guam is a threat or attack on the United States. They have said that America will be defended. And I also want to remind the national media that Guam is American soil. And we have 200,000 Americans in Guam and the Marianas. We are not just a military installation.
Well, Guam hosts both a U.S. Naval and Air Force base and has about 6,000 troops based there. But a missile strike would be far more devastating on the civilian population, which is around 160,000 people. Guam is more than 3,400 kilometers from North Korea. But Pyongyang has 4 types of ballistic missiles that can reach beyond that distance.
Colonel, I guess I'll start with what is it that we can do right now if this is, well, it's getting pretty serious?
We're running out of choices and we're running out of chances. The moment of truth is approaching. It's not quite there, but it's dangerously close. And Trish, something we all should worry about is because I think our intelligence community, which is actually very, very good, was so burned by the 2003 weapons of mass destruction issue that they've been overly cautious. And we've seen North Korea develop more and more capabilities more rapidly than any intelligence agencies anywhere thought.
14 minutes ago, the President of the United States tweeted this out. After many years of failure, countries are coming together to finally address the dangers posed by North Korea. We must be tough and decisive. What's he talking about? Joining us right now, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley.
Former governor of the great state of South Carolina.
Absolutely.
We're proud of you and your career. Thank you so much.
So what do you make of the President's tweet?
Well, you know, I think Saturday was a huge win for the United States. It was a huge win for the United Nations. It was not a good day for North Korea. And basically what you saw was all the countries come together and say, this has got to stop. This is not something that we think can be reckless and just casually dealt with, and that's what he's done. And I think they hit him, and basically we hit him hard.
Yeah. Did something happen? Did they do something that even pressed the buttons of Russia and China that made it easier for you to convince them to go along with this?
No, it was really me saying how many more ICBM tests do we need to have before we do something.
Good.
And at what point are we going to show action? And really, that goes back to what we've tried to do at the United Nations, which is stop talking about it. Let's get something done. And so last Monday, I basically told the Security Council, we've talked enough. It's time to get this done. And look, yes, China and Russia were not the easiest, but at the end of the day, they came through, and that's all that matters.
Good for you, 15-0. That's awesome. Tell us about what's our plan if the sanctions don't work? Because North Korea, it seems like they're not working after his response.
Well, first of all, on Saturday during the vote, we did say this is not the solution to North Korea. What this does do is this kicks him in the gut. This goes right after the hard currency. He's going to feel it, and all that money that he's been using for his ballistic missile program, you know, and he's not feeding his people, it just got reduced in a big way. What we are saying is now the ball's in your court. Kim now has to decide, is he going to turn around and say, okay, the international community is telling me to stop, or is he going to have, you know, a temper tantrum and go and respond?
Well, it sounds like he's having a temper tantrum because of the sanctions. He is now saying through state-run television, we will mobilize all resources and take physical action. It sounds like we are getting closer to a shooting war.
But we don't run scared. This had to happen. We had to go after his hard currency. We had to stop him. How he responds, he's going to now have to think, what's the end game? Is he really going to come after the United States knowing what the United States can do back? He's got to make that calculation. He now has to decide that. And I think what the United States does is we continue to know what our options are, and we continue to be able to
What are our options? If the sanctions aren't working, is it just to put ground troops? Is it what's the next step?
I think it depends on what he does. You know, so if he goes and he still tests small things, he's going to watch his hard currency go way down. He's going to start to see some real kicks when it comes to his ballistic missile program. If he chooses to do something more dangerous, the United States will respond accordingly. And I think the international community will respond
One thing you didn't do, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you did not sanction Chinese banks that deal with North Korea. Would that be the next step?
So what we did do is we sanctioned one of the primary banks that North Korea deals with, and that was a hard-hitting bank that we did do. So we went after coal, lead, iron, seafood. We went after sanction designations, including the bank, and then we went a step further. No new laborers, which they make a lot of money, no new laborers leaving North Korea. And then we also went after joint ventures, no joint ventures. So this is pretty comprehensive.
They make $500 million off that joint labor. Now, would another step be oil? Because if you stop China from selling oil to North Korea, what would that do?
Yes, of course. Oil would really kick hard.
But right now they're getting their oil.
They're getting it, but we just cut $1 billion out of a $3 billion export. I mean, a third of their hard currency is being hit. They're going to feel this, and they're going to feel it in a big way. What was better was China came out and said to the international community, we're going to follow through on these sanctions, and we want everyone else to do it as well. It's a new tone coming from China. It's a new reaction coming from China.
How did you get China and Russia to come on board?
I think that with China, we basically said enough talk. We're done, and you have the ability to control 90% of their trade, and you can't make excuses anymore. To their credit, they stepped up. We did some heavy negotiations. We got them there. Russia, I think they wanted to delay it initially. I don't think that's what they wanted, but we got them there.
Right.
And as long as they were there, that's what matters.
Ambassador, on the front page of FoxNews.com right now, there is a story that apparently the intel community has picked up. Anti-ship cruise missiles were being loaded onto a patrol boat or patrol boats in North Korea. What can you tell us about that?
I can't. I can't talk about anything that's classified, and if that's in the newspaper, that's a shame. But I'll
You have no reason to believe that's not accurate, though.
I have no reason to comment on that.
That shouldn't be in the newspaper. Is that another leak, I guess?
You know, it's one of these things. I don't know what's going on, but I will tell you it's incredibly dangerous when things get out into the press like that. You're not only just getting a scoop on something, you're playing with people's lives.
Yeah.